Hello and welcome to World Talks here on TVP World. I'm your host Benjamin Lee, and please join me and my guest on this next interview. Ukraine is reportedly preparing to ask its allies for up to $20 billion in additional military support at next week's Ukraine Defense Contact Group meeting in Brussels. The request comes as Kyiv seeks to expand its drone campaign and maintain pressure on Russian military and energy infrastructure deep inside Russia. With Europe facing growing calls to shoulder a larger share of Ukraine's defense burden, the meeting could reveal how willing allies are to fund not only Ukraine's defense, but also its ability to keep Russia under sustained pressure. Joining us today on TVP World to discuss is Rostyslav Khotin, a senior editor at Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Hello, Benjamin.
Now, before we dive into this $20 billion additional military support as well as Ukraine's frontline action, the most recent news that we saw of Ukraine's heavyweight boxer world champion Oleksandr Usyk meeting Donald Trump in the White House. Do we know what exactly is being discussed there, and do you think this could be some sort of sports diplomacy?
Yeah, Usyk is Ukraine's most probably recognized sporting face in the world. Ukrainians are very proud, especially when Usyk wins his boxing matches during the war. It lifts up the mood of Ukrainian population. Imagine Ukrainians, being shelled by Russia constantly with drones and missiles, and Usyk victories lifts up the mood in Ukraine, and also makes Ukrainian proud. And also many soldiers from the Ukrainian front lines, despite the difficult situation on the battlefield, are watching Usyk's boxing matches and support him. And it also gives them a moral boost of their morale. So Usyk is not just an ordinary champion for Ukraine. He symbolizes Ukrainian spirit, Ukrainian resilience, Ukrainian strength, and Ukrainians are very proud. We don't know exactly what was discussed between Usyk and Donald Trump, but the very fact that the leader of the most powerful nation in the world, the United States of America, President Donald Trump, meets the biggest kind of champions, the holders of the biggest number of boxing belts, the most prestigious boxing belt, champion belts in the world, Oleksandr Usyk. It's an enormous event for Ukraine, but not only for Ukraine, because Usyk has many fans around the world. A lot of people around the world are his fans, watching his matches, boxing matches, and supports him. He's very popular, not just in Ukraine, but worldwide. So it's like a significant event, not just for Ukraine or Ukrainian sports, but generally for whole Ukrainian nation amid the war, and also for the Usyk's fan and boxing lovers around the world.
Right. And U.S. President Donald Trump is known to put a lot of emphasis on personal relations as well, and being a boxing and MMA fan himself and having now met Usyk. Do you think there's a chance that diplomatically Usyk could actually secure any sort of deal or something from the United States that even President Zelensky wasn't able to?
Yes, in a way, a lot of Ukrainian sporting champions are also kind of promoters of Ukrainian cause in the world. We know that tennis players, footballers are not just playing their matches, but also showing support for Ukraine with blue and yellow stripes, or making statements in support of Ukraine and sending signal to Ukrainian people to be resilient despite Russian military attacks. And Usyk also is known for he's into politics as well. He many times he used Ukrainian national symbols. He dressed up as a Ukrainian Cossack to lift up Ukrainian spirit, to show that we are a strong nation with a long history, and we will not give up to Russia. We will stay strong and fight Russian aggression. He also, once he took to his final boxing match, sabre of Ukrainian 17th, 18th century Cossack leader, Hetman Ivan Mazepa. So he's into this kind of world of political gestures and statements. He supports armed forces of Ukraine with his money. He wants as a prize money. He supports armed forces of Ukraine. He is kind of strong supporter of Ukrainian resilience and Ukrainian nation. He is patriot of Ukraine. So it's important for Usyk also to be in the White House with Donald Trump. It's also a seal of approval that Donald Trump does not see any sportsman. He sees only the greatest ones. And Usyk is definitely the greatest, one of the greatest in the sports history of the world. Probably one of the best boxers of all time.
Right. Now, going back to the military support that Ukraine is reportedly preparing to ask its allies for, they argue that this increased funding would allow them to intensify pressure on Russia through drone and long-range and middle-range strikes. We've recently seen a lot of success when it comes to the cutting off of logistics in the Crimean Peninsula. Can you help us understand how significant is that strategy overall throughout this war?
You know, the thing is that it's kind of unusual turn, unexpected turn in Ukrainian request, because usually Ukraine asks Western allies for financial help to defend itself. Now it seems that Ukraine is asking also Western allies to give these $20 billion new loans or credit. They kind of to attack Russia even more, to put pressure more on Russia, even more pressure on Russia. So it's unusual turn of events. Ukraine is asking not just only for defense of itself, but also to keep pressure on Russia and to attack Russia even more. So Ukraine asked, first of all, of course, to protect its air defense systems. That's fine. It's for its own protection, but also for more long-range and mid-strike drones to attack Russian infrastructure in the Russian Federation, but also to keep pressure attacking Russian logistical lines on the occupied territories of eastern Ukraine and southern Ukraine and Crimea. So now the pledge which was made for this year by Ukrainian friends and partners stands at $38 billion. But NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte said that we need to provide Ukraine with up to $60 billion of military aid. So this $20 billion actually solves this issue if the Western partners of Ukraine will give this additional $20 billion of military support, military aid to Ukraine. That would mean that Western friends and allies of Ukraine will meet their obligation and this kind of benchmark established by Secretary General Rutte. Also, Ukraine still keeps targeting very actively energy infrastructure, military infrastructure, on the chemical infrastructure on the territory of Russian Federation. Just this night, there was a long-range Ukrainian drones strike oil terminal in Temryuk, in the town of Temryuk, in Krasnodar Krai, on the Azov Sea coast. A few days ago, there was another strike against Afinsky oil refinery, again in Krasnodar region. After that, there was a strike against chemical plant in Kuybyshev, town of Kuybyshev in Samara region in Russia Federation. It's quite away from Ukrainian border. It's like 700, 800 kilometers from Ukrainian border. There was a strike against Tatarstan, oil infrastructure in Tatarstan, Republic of Tatarstan in the Russian Federation, again this week. So Ukraine, now, to be honest, the proportion between drones used by Ukraine and Russia is in Ukrainian favor, 1.5 to 1. Ukraine strikes 1.5, makes 1.5 strikes more with drones than Russia does. You know, the big Russia, the country which is 3 times bigger in terms of population and many more times bigger in terms of size and potential. But Ukrainians somehow have an advantage in drones, FPV drones and other drones, using wisely and cleverly drones to cut Russian logistical lines along the line of contact, along the front line, and also to use long-range drones to hit targets on the territory of Russian Federation, but also in occupied territories of the Ukrainian South and Ukrainian East and Crimea.
It does seem like these strikes are taking a lot of effect when it comes to actually cutting off the logistics, be it the oil infrastructure, be it the logistical lines like you mentioned. Now, we're looking at the situation in Crimea where a lot of, supposing major arteries that is transporting munition, personnel to the peninsula is also being severed as well. Recently, we saw numbers and Crimean Peninsula facing fuel shortages and supply shortages. Do you think this is enough to significantly impact the front lines, seeing Russians might have to pull back some of the personnel because of the lack of resources? Is taking back Crimea even a possible option here?
Crimea is an interesting issue. Several days ago, I watched a video filmed on a mobile phone in Crimea. People were driving in a car and filming Kyiv, which was standing to get petrol from the petrol station because there are significant shortages of petrol in Crimea. And there were more than 250 cars standing in a queue, lining in a queue to get a petrol. 250 cars, a queue of more than 250 cars. It's unimaginable. It's, oil-rich Russia cannot guarantee supplies of oil or fuel to petrol and diesel to Crimeans in occupied Crimea, Crimean Peninsula. Also, it is interesting to notice that Ukraine has been striking military targets and energy targets in Crimea. And also recently, Ukraine has started targeting this kind of land bridge from Rostov region in Russia along the northern coast of Azov Sea to Crimea, to Crimean Peninsula. There is even a highway called Novorossiya Highway built by Russia to supply Crimea, but it's now under control of Ukrainian drones, and it will be even increased control of Ukrainian drones. Ukrainians are cutting this kind of highway with drones, and it's dangerous for Russia to bring fuel and other supplies to Crimea by this highway. And also before, Ukraine was able to hit many times the Crimean bridge or Kerch bridge, which connects Russia-occupied Crimea with mainland Russia. So Crimea will be cut off completely. People in Crimea now thinking, sooner or later, but Ukraine will be back. So don't count on Russia too much. It can't guarantee your economic well-being. It can't guarantee your security. So, nevertheless, the time will come when Ukraine will get back to Crimea.
Right. So let's wrap things all up and harken back to the top of the interview. Well, coincidentally enough, Oleksandr Usyk is actually from Crimea himself as well. And with these all like a diplomatic offensive with Usyk in the United States and with this renewed call for European allies to additional military support, do you think the outlook is good for Ukraine to secure these resources and these weapons, ammunition needed in order for another push?
I think that time is now placed in Ukraine's advantage. Ukraine has upper hand now, cleverly using drone tactics and strategy and diplomacy. Now the Ukrainian allies and friends understands that indeed winds blows in the Ukrainian sails, so that Ukraine has advantage, probably for the first time since the end of 2022, after the successful battle of Kherson, liberating Kherson. For the first time in several years, the Ukraine has upper hand, has initiative, and Russia is losing. Russia is losing a lot of soldiers. Russia is losing ground. Ukraine is making successful mid-range strikes, middle strikes, drone strikes against Russian logistics, and long range strikes against targets in the Russian Federation. Diplomatically, Ukraine is very successful. So I think that Ukraine has upper hand and has initiative now.
Definitely, and I think it's very important for the allies as well to strike while the iron is hot. We'll see how things turns out. But in the meantime, thank you so much for your input and insight. I really appreciate it. And thanks for being with us on TVP World.
Thank you, Benjamin.
Yes. And thank you for tuning into this edition of World Talks. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned. to TVP World.